learned a few things myself there. And it was a nice pivot. It was a really great pivot because we run a fund called Arcadian in the cannabis and hemp space. And interestingly enough, we do believe this is a technology. It's an emerging industry for sure, an innovative industry, but it's a science-based technology. It's not necessarily computer-based, but it's homeostasis-based. It's internal. It's human-based. And I've spent 15, 20 years in finance in my career as well. And honestly, saw too many business plans that were about disrupting everything. And we saw the movement happening in the botanical wellness space. And we wanted to be a part of something that was reconnecting everything. I thought to myself, why does everything have to disrupt things? Why can't they just make them better? And that's what this industry is doing. This topic today is about what's going on in the cannabis space, the investing climate. And there's a lot to tell you, but let's unpack it a little bit. Let's go back and do this in 3 phases. Number 1, let's talk about before the pandemic. What was happening in our industry before the pandemic? Well, you're looking at a 35% compound annual growth number year over year going into the pandemic. Fortunately, in 2018, you reached a little bit of peak of the trade and basically had a situation where throughout 2019, these companies were working towards profitability, running lean companies, being properly valued, and a couple of other ups and downs. Heading into the pandemic, we had a great thing going in terms of what the industry's appetite was. Then the pandemic hits. What happens during phase 2 here in the last 3 phases we're going to go through? Phase 2 is, well, now you get to be tried and tested. You look at an industry and you say it's defensible, and then something happens, and then you get the chance to prove it, and all of a sudden we were deemed essential. And I'm so glad to be here with you, friends, because if that hadn't happened, we may be in a different place. But over the last 6 months, we proved to be resilient. We've been able to continue business as usual and increase profits in many, many, many cases, as you see in some of the public companies. So I think it's important to realize that before the pandemic hit, the industry was already working through some valuation and some profitability concerns. That when the pandemic hit, you get to be an essential business, and then all of a sudden you're able to show strength. Now, phase 3, what happens going forward? What does that mean for the industry after we get into the pandemic and we start to see exactly what the industry is doing in response to that and bringing people medicine? Well, the 3rd phase is post-election. So we're going to talk a little bit about today where we are leading up to this election. Very difficult to call a whole bunch of specifics, but I don't think you have to, because no matter what happens, it's a good thing for us. A lot has just been tabled. A lot has just not been heard. The support is there, both in Congress and Senate, for certain aspects of cannabis and hemp legislature. And so I think you really have to pay attention to November. But no matter what happens, expect a flurry of activity leading into Q1, Q2 of next year. We talk about survive and then thrive. That's what's going on in the cannabis space right now. So I wanted to start off at least with framing where things are and how we got here in our space. But to go back to some of Sergio's points, it's like a technology. What's happening here is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. It's almost like you're watching this human-based transfer of information happening that happens inside of a computer. And it's because it's solving human beings' problems. The science behind this is why the whole thing matters. What is the state of the industry today? One person makes the next person's life a little bit better in some way, and we create a product for them and an industry to support that. This is not replacing a brand on a shelf. This is creating entirely new categories. It's almost like if you went back to the early days of venture and technology, if you went back to maybe the first days of Apple, if you went to Steve Jobs' garage and with Wozniak, and they're in there working on things, they're trying to take technology, put it into a consumer product and deliver it to the consumer to create a new experience. And that's what branding is. And that's what's happening in the cannabis and hemp space right now. These 2 plants are absolutely phenomenal. They're natural and they're good for you. And now we're figuring out what products we can put them in. And then how do you brand that experience? And it's an entirely new brand. The consumer public has no idea most of these brands are even coming right now. And that's what's amazing. We get to define a category in many ways define a generation. It seems similar to me if you go back to 1918, 1930s, alcohol prohibition. You have a pandemic then as well, a war, depression, a lot of need, and then a lot of public support, and something happens. I think you're going to see that here. I really do. Just don't know what direction. We're going to have to wait till November. Pay attention to the cannabis space, because I think as a category, we're a little bit different. I think we fit with this new sort of movement, the health and wellness, the being present and mindful approach that the society, frankly, is dying for. And the plant botanical wellness in general as a category is something that can not only generate extremely outsized returns, not have to disrupt the world, we can put it back together, focus on internal science and technology, internal homeostasis. That's all our bodies are trying to do anyways. Let's help ourselves first. If we want to be impactful, this is that opportunity. Having been in finance for a very long time and as the founder and major partner of Arcadian, our goal was not just to go make money, but we wanted to target an industry that had growth, that had outsized opportunity, and this one does. But what could we do for the world? Something else the panelists before me talked about, Sergio. What can we do good for the world? How do you measure that? Well, we can do that here. There, to me, is not another industry that's going to generate these types of returns that will do this much good for the world. Please reach out to us at arcadiancap.com. We'd love to connect with you. We believe in collaboration. Whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, the best way to do this in this climate today is together. And if you collaborate and you work together and you have an industry growing this much, and by the way, it's not just eyeballs or value potential. We're talking about $16 billion in revenue last year. We're talking about 300-something thousand jobs. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of tax revenue. And so this industry has real growth. I would argue probably the highest growth opportunity in the country, maybe in the world, when you look at real cash revenue, job creation, asset value creation, because there's hard assets here too. So when you look at a space like this, with all that opportunity, work together. Call Arcadian Cap, arcadiancap.com. We would love to work with you if you're an entrepreneur, talk about your business. We're a growth investor, but we're here to help in any way we can. If you're an investor, it's just emerging industry 101. If you think the thing's going to move forward, the best thing you can do is reach out to one of the great funds, which humbly I think we're one of, but there are other really great funds as well. And we work very close together, just like they did in the 90s through early 2000s. When an emerging industry is moving and you see it happen, you got to work together. So please reach out to us. I think you'll be happy if you put your time and effort into this space. Most importantly, God bless. Thank you.